It's February 7th, 1882, and the location is Mississippi City, Mississippi, outside of the Barnes Hotel. A then 23-year-old John L. Sullivan faces and defeats then American bare-knuckle champion Paddy Ryan. The governor of Mississippi was Robert Lowry, and he had issued a proclamation ordering all local sheriffs to do whatever was necessary to stop the illegal fight. This turned out to be unsuccessful, but Lowry wouldn't go quietly as he sought the arrest of both fighters after the fight. Ryan came into the fight as a favorite with high-level backing from the National Police Gazzette, America's #1 sporting paper. Richard Kyle Fox owned the National Police Gazzette. Fox was an employee of the company who started to gain traction in the world of media. When the Police Gazette started to struggle financially and the original owners could not pay Fox his proper wage, he was given the company with an agreement that he would take on all of the debt. At the time, newspapers were the primary means for getting information to the masses. Essentially, Fox dictated who would have been recognized as the world's heavyweight champion in boxing. It's a bit more complicating as boxing as we know it now was not the only nor the most popular means for watching a fight. The two other prevalent forms of fighting were bare-knuckle fighting and London prize ring rules. Each of these forms of fighting allowed for tactics that are illegal in boxing as we know it today. This included the allowance of throwing, holding, and spiked shoes were used as a weapon in many cases. Also, many of the fights took place in the unlikeliest of places. Before his fight with Paddy Ryan, Sullivan had racked up several wins and campaigned to lure Ryan into a championship fight. He had mass public backing, and it was pretty much known that he was a top contender for Ryan. Sullivan hadn't fought under the bare-knuckle rules and primarily operated under the Marquess of Queensbury rules. The Marquess of Queensbury rules were boxing rules drafted in London in 1865 and published in 1867. They were backed and endorsed by the 9th Marquess of Queensbury, John Douglas. The Queensbury rules differed from the London rules in 4 major respects. Contestants wore padded gloves. A round consisted of 3 minutes of fighting, followed by a minute of rest. Wrestling was illegal, and any fighter who went down had to get up unaided within 10 seconds. If a fighter was unable to get up, he was declared knocked out, and the fight was over. During this period, the introduction of the first weight divisions also took place. With Paddy Ryan having Richard Fox's backing, Fox determined that the only way that Sullivan would be able to get the shot at Ryan was by him agreeing to fight under the London prize fight rules. At the time, boxing was widely banned and viewed as a vile and degenerative sport. Boxers faced fines and jail time if caught participating in what was deemed a prized fight. It wasn't just limited to the boxers, as often the individuals backing and setting up the fights were at risk. The one caveat or exception to the rule was gloved exhibitions deemed educational. The Marquess of Queensbury rules essentially fit the billing when taking away the prize or financial aspect. Through this loophole, fighters could box as long as funding wasn't exchanged between fighters and a knockout didn't occur. Of course, most of the officials in charge turned a blind eye, and these exhibitions were legitimate fights disguised as exhibitions. Because of this, Sullivan generally refused to fight under London and bare-knuckle rules. Fast forward to 1889. Sullivan continues to rack up wins during this period and even goes on a cross-country campaign challenging any man to a 4-round fight. Sullivan's opponents would be paid a sum of money if able to last the entire fight with Sullivan without being knocked out or having their corners stop the fight. Now, it should be noted that this didn't include black fighters or any fighters of color, so a segment of the fighting population wasn't able to accept the challenge. Anyway, Sullivan goes from city to city, racking up wins and even fights overseas in the UK and France. Sullivan is unofficially recognized as the heavyweight champion of America and the world. Once again enters Richard Fox, who puts out a front-page article in the National Police Gazzette stating that for Sullivan to be genuinely recognized as champion, he would have to beat the guy the National Police Gazzette recognized as the world's heavyweight champion. Additionally, he noted that a belt had to change hands under the traditional bare-knuckle fight format, to be considered legitimate, as the championship had always been passed down in that fashion throughout the years. Fox would ultimately back Jake Kilrain, an American-born fighter who had drawn Jem Smith in 1887 in France, to claim the world heavyweight title via the Police Gazzette, recognizing him as champion. This infuriated Sullivan, who was still firmly against fighting with bare knuckles as he ran into issues with law enforcement after the Ryan fight some years earlier. Many of the old-school boxing fans at the time agreed with Fox and the notion that a heavyweight crown could only be passed through bare-knuckle competition. Though hesitant, Sullivan agrees to face Kilrain under London prize ring bare-knuckle rules. Sullivan made it clear it would be his last fight under these rules. Given the illegal nature of the fight, it had to be planned in relative secrecy, with the final fight location not being disclosed until the very last minute. Near Hattiesburg, Mississippi, the fight took place on July 8, 1889. After 75 rounds and 2 hours and 16 minutes, Sullivan is victorious when Kilrain's corner throws in the sponge to call off the fight. The governor of Mississippi at the time was still Robert Lowry, and he had around 1,000 state troopers searching for the fight location leading up to the contest. After the fight, the Sullivan and Kilrain camps essentially dart out of the ring and head to New Orleans. Charges had been brought up against both men, along with warrants issued for their arrests by Governor Lowry. This included those involved in planning the fight. Both fighters are on the run, and Sullivan is eventually caught in Tennessee. Legal issues mounted in Mississippi as Lowry wanted to make an example out of Sullivan and Jake Kilrain. Sullivan was ultimately indicted and essentially pled to a lesser charge, though he avoided going back to Mississippi for a plea deal to serve 20 days in jail. After the entire ordeal, Sullivan vowed never to fight bare-knuckle again, making the Sullivan vs. Kilrain fight the last official bare-knuckle heavyweight championship fight. Sullivan remained champion until an eventual defeat in the only loss of his career at the hands of James J. Corbett in 1892. This is where the lineal heavyweight championship line began, which brought us to where we are today, some 100 years later, where Tyson Fury is the lineal heavyweight champion of the world. Credit John L. Sullivan for changing the sport of boxing.
Hey, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.